Let me ask you something. Have you ever had one of those days where your Mac felt just off? Not broken, not crashing, just not quite the way it usually feels. In situations like this, what do we do after reading online? We usually open Activity Monitor, we look at the graphs, we look at some spikes, and instantly our brain goes, something is wrong. And that reaction, that is something what we're going to talk about today. Most of the time, the spike you see in Activity Monitor, or you see that memory pressure temporarily there, or you see number of processes, they really do not connect directly with the actual problem that you're experiencing that specific day. Eventually, as a curious user, we decide that is a problem. But as I have said before, it is important for you to know, macOS does not communicate in moments. It communicates in patterns. So in today's video, I want to show you the only 3 Mac signals that actually matter for long-term performance and stability, and why everything else is just noise. First, let's simplify something. Signals versus noise. macOS is measuring things constantly. It does not mean it is asking you to react to each one of them. A stat on your Mac changes moment to moment, and a signal repeats over time. And that's the key difference. For example, in Activity Monitor, you see CPU spiking for a few seconds only, RAM jumping when you open apps. Sometimes you hear fan ramping briefly, and battery percent is dropping during heavy task. That is just noise. It's normal. It is expected from your Mac. Now, if we talk about signal, that feels completely different. Signals don't disappear quickly. Performance slowing under normal daily work. Memory pressure staying elevated even after rest, despite there are not too many apps open. Storage pressure showing up again and again during real workflows. Most people panic over this. If you react to every spike, every dip, every busy moment, you end up fighting the system instead of understanding it. So first, let's take a look at the first real signal. And honestly, this one is really misunderstood very oftenly. It's not a fan noise. It's not a warm keyboard. It's not your Mac getting hot just for once. The real signal is a sustained thermal behavior. Let me explain what that actually means. If your Mac gets warm during heavy workflow, like exporting some video file, compiling some code, or rendering something heavy, that's normal. Now let me give you an example. Every time I render a large 4K video file on this MacBook, I can clearly feel it's getting warmer. But that's not consistent. As of right now, everything's pretty normal. But when I do a heavy workflow, when I'm rendering something heavy, I can clearly feel it is getting warmer. And that is simply normal. Now, if during normal daily work, like browsing, documents, light multitasking, your Mac constantly slows down, downclocks, or struggle to maintain that responsiveness, that's different. Not because it's hot, but because it is not recovering. macOS is designed to push hard and then return to baseline. If you have a Mac that does not return to baseline reliably, that's a signal. One warm session means nothing, but a pattern over weeks, that matters. Now let's talk about memory. This is where exactly a lot of Mac users completely lose their minds. When you see high RAM usage, that is not the signal. Let me say that again. High RAM usage, that is not the signal. macOS uses memory aggressively on purpose Unused RAM on your Mac does not make it healthy. It just means it is not being used efficiently. The real signal is memory pressure that does not fully clear. If you notice memory pressure is staying elevated, even after light workloads, after idle time, after rest, that's the problem. That is clearly a signal. Not because something is broken, but because that system is under sustained load that it cannot resolve clearly. Sometimes it's because of the hardware limits, and sometimes it's a hardware aging, but it's rarely macOS failing. That's why closing apps obsessively, watching free RAM, restarting over and over usually does not solve anything. You are reacting to noise, you're not reading the signals. Now, the third signal, it ties everything together. And this is more deeper than most people think. Okay, so when we talk about a storage state, the signal is not that my disk is full 60%, 70%, or 80%. The real signal is the storage pressure. During active work, macOS relies heavily on read and write behavior, especially when memory pressure rises. If free space drops too low during active workflows, the system has less room to maneuver. Not permanently, but enough to affect caching, responsiveness, and recovery. That's why two identical Macs can feel completely different at the same time. One has breathing room, and other is constantly negotiating for space. For example, on my Mac, the internal drive stays mostly free. 80% almost stays always free. I barely use 20% of the drive. However, during heavy editing projects, active media files temporarily consume large chunk of space. And that's when I clearly feel more warm behavior, more strain, and slight sluggishness. Not because something is broken, but because active data is compressing the system's flexibility. And that is the only one big reason I use mostly external SSDs to run big projects on them or move data time to time. Here's the mistake that most people make. They react to everything, and in doing that, they miss a few signals that actually predict issues. So what can you safely ignore? Brief CPU spikes are normal. One slow day, normal. Fan ramping once in a while, that's normal. macOS adapts to context. It does not panic. It recalibrates. If your Mac recovers, return to baseline, and behaves predictably over time, it is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Most Macs don't fail suddenly. They warn quietly before something serious happens. So here's the takeaway. Don't watch everything. Start watching only the signals that matter. When you understand these three signals, your Mac stops feeling fragile. Instead, it starts feeling predictable. And that is the real upgrade. You are not just using a Mac. You are understanding how it is designed to communicate. And now, if you're ready to learn how to smartly manage Mac storage, then here's the video for you. And before you go, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe Crazy Ears for future tech tips, tricks, and solutions. Until next time, you take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.